Unsealed Archives, New York, 1943. The scribe worked by a single lamp in a cave above the Dead Sea. Outside, the Roman column was 3 days away, maybe 2. He could hear them in the settlement below, arguing about what to bury and what to carry. They would carry too much. They always carried too much. The army was not interested in what a man could carry. The army was interested in what a man could not hide. He rolled the last scroll tight and sealed the clay jar with pitch. The lamp threw his shadow against the cave wall. A man sealing a jar. He set the jar in the back of the cave. He placed 2 others in front of it. He left. 19 centuries later, a shepherd threw a stone into the cave because one of his goats had wandered inside. The stone broke a jar. The scrolls inside were intact. The scribe was right about time. January 7th, 1943. The Hotel New Yorker, Manhattan, room 3327. The maid knocked twice. She had been told not to disturb the old man, but the "Do Not Disturb" sign had not moved in 2 days, and the hotel manager wanted the account settled. She opened the door with her passkey. The room smelled of nothing. That was the first wrong thing. A man's room should smell of something. He was on the bed, thin as a heron, dressed in a suit, white shirt, dark tie. His hands folded across his chest, the fingers interlaced. He had arranged himself. The suit was pressed. He had pressed it himself because he did not allow the hotel laundry to touch his clothes. He did not allow anyone to touch his clothes. On the bedside table, a photograph of a bird, white, ordinary, a pigeon. The frame was simple wood. Tesla had taken the photograph himself with a camera he kept in the room for this purpose. The bird was facing the camera, her head slightly tilted. If you looked at the photograph long enough, you could believe the bird was looking back at you. Beside the photograph, a single sheet of paper, handwritten, written slowly in the last hours when his heart was already failing and his hand was steady. My brain is only a receiver. In the universe, there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. I have not penetrated into the secrets of this core, but I know that it exists. The maid touched nothing. She backed out of the room and told the floor manager. The floor manager told the hotel manager. The hotel manager called the police. The police notified the FBI. The FBI notified the Office of Alien Property Custodian, because a dead Serbian was an alien, regardless of how many American cities he had wired for light. Regardless of the fact that the alternating current powering the hotel's switchboard and elevators and the lamp on the manager's desk was his invention, given freely to the world before any of them were born. By nightfall, the room was sealed. 2 officers stood at the door. The photograph of the pigeon remained on the bedside table. Downstairs in the basement, stacked in rows against the foundation walls, 80 trunks held every paper the man had written in 60 years. Notebooks, patents, correspondence, letters in 6 languages, diagrams of machines that had never been built, calculations that referenced frequencies no one had published. And somewhere in those 80 trunks, in a smaller trunk, with a brass clasp and no label, a single black notebook that contained everything the official inventory would never mention. 2 days later, a physicist from MIT arrived to open them. The physicist's name was John George Trump, 35 years old, associate professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. builder of Van de Graaff generators and X-ray machines for cancer patients. Calm hands, a heavy brown overcoat, built to last 20 years. He folded it over the back of a chair before he opened the first trunk. The War Department had recommended him because he understood high-voltage systems, because he held the appropriate clearance, and because the men who sent him believed he would write the report they needed written. What he carried into the basement of the Hotel New Yorker, he had not explained to his wife over coffee. It was this. His mother had died the previous spring, and in her papers he had found a newspaper clipping from 1917 about Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower being demolished. She had circled a sentence about wireless energy transmission and written in the margin in pencil a single word: someday. He did not know why his mother had saved a clipping about a Serbian inventor's failed tower. He did not know what she thought someday meant. But when the War Department called and said they needed a high-voltage specialist to review Tesla's papers, Trump said yes before the sentence was finished. He stood in the basement on the morning of January 9th, 1943, and looked at the trunks, 80 of them. Whatever system Tesla had used died with him. An officer from the custodian's office handed him a clipboard and a government pen. Catalog everything. Flag anything with military application. 3 days. 3 days for 80 trunks. The war won't wait for a dead man's filing system. The officer left. The basement was cold. Bare bulbs on the ceiling, humming faintly when the current ran uneven. Above him, the hotel continued its business, as if the most complete record of electrical thought in the 20th century are not stacked in its basement in unlabeled trunks. He opened the first one. Notebooks. Dozens of them. Leather-bound, the covers dark with handling. The margins dense with the calculations in a hand that started precise and grew looser across decades. Some pages bore diagrams of machines that did not yet exist. Rotating fields, oscillating circuits. Wireless transmission arrays drawn with a draftsman's precision and annotated in 3 languages. Others carried equations that referenced frequencies Trump had never seen published in any journal. One measurement appeared in the margins of 3 separate notebooks spanning 40 years of work, the resonance of the earth itself, the standing wave between the ground and the sky, circled in pencil, underlined, circled again in a different pencil years later. He had returned to his own reading and found it still true and still ignored. Trump copied it into his own ledger with a question mark. He did not know that in 1952, a physicist named Winfried Otto Schumann would calculate that same resonance, fix it at 7.83 hertz, and put his name on it for good. Tesla had found the thing itself half a century earlier with equipment he built in a shed on the high prairie, and written it in every notebook he touched for the rest of his life. Nobody had noticed, because nobody was looking in notebooks that belonged to a man the century had already decided was finished. Trump only knew the reading kept appearing. He opened the second notebook. On the inside cover, in Tesla's careful hand, "My brain is only a receiver." Trump's pen hovered over his ledger. He did not write anything. The boiler cycled. The bare bulbs hummed. He told himself it was philosophy. He had been told to look for weapons. He kept looking. The midwife said, "He is a child of the storm." His mother said, "No, he will be a child of the light." Smiljan, Croatia, July 10th, 1856, midnight. A thunderstorm split the sky above the village at the moment of delivery. The midwife crossed herself. The mother held the infant and watched the lightning through the window. The pictures came early, complete and detailed, arriving in full color and full dimension, without any act of imagination. A machine he had never seen, working. A device that did not exist, operating. The images presented themselves complete, composed elsewhere, delivered whole. His brother Dane was the family's pride, brilliant, physical, a firstborn son in a small village where the future is a narrow road and only one child gets to walk it. Dane fell from a horse when Nicola was 7. The horse came back to the stable without a rider. The family closed the door of the house and did not open it for 3 days. When they opened it, Nicola stood in the doorway, 7 years old and alive. The family looked at the son they still had. He was the replacement. The visions intensified after Dane's death. Biographers would later call them hallucinations. Tesla called them pictures. He could rotate them in his mind and examine them from any angle, test them by running them at speed in the theater behind his eyes. He built nothing on paper that he had not first built in the air before him. This was not imagination. Imagination assembles. These arrived, assemble. He was 16 when his father told him he would study for the priesthood. Nicola contracted cholera instead. He lay in bed for 9 months. His father, terrified of losing the second son, sat at the bed and bargained. "I will send you to the finest engineering school in Europe if you recover." Nicola got out of bed. At engineering school, he discovered gambling and discovered he was very good at it, because the cards told him where they would land before they landed. He lost his tuition in a single night and won it back the following week, and saw that the capacity could be pointed at anything and it would work. He chose to point it somewhere else. His father never knew about the tuition. Budapest, February 1882. He was walking through the city park with a friend when the rotating magnetic field arrived. Complete, functioning. Every component visible and operational, rotating in the air before him, projected from a source he could not identify and would spend the remaining 60 years of his life trying to name. He knelt in the path and drew it in the dirt with a stick. The other walkers in the park gave them space. A man was kneeling in the dirt, talking to himself. The diagram was the alternating current motor, the polyphase system, the thing that would replace Edison's direct current and light the world. It was complete on the ground in front of him before he lifted the stick. He looked at it in the dirt. The picture had come from somewhere, and wherever that somewhere was, it would send more pictures if he remained precise enough to receive them. The mechanism was stillness. You held yourself at a frequency that matched the transmission, and the transmission came through you. You did not generate it. You conducted it. He stood up. His knees were dirty. His friend asked him what it was. "The future," Tesla said. He would spend 60 years trying to find the right word for the place the pictures came from. He tried inspiration. He tried intuition. He tried the cosmic mind. None of them were right. The right word would have to name what was already there before he arrived. Something patient. Something that did not push. Something that simply transmitted and waited for a receiver sensitive enough to pick it up without adding noise. He never found the word. He never stopped receiving. Trump opened the patent trunk on the morning of the second day. The legal records of a man who had held over 300 patents and died owing the hotel $2,000. The arithmetic was impossible. The man who owned the electrical 20th century, whose alternating current system powered every light in every city Trump had ever visited, whose name was on the generators at Niagara Falls, could not pay for his room. He recognized the patent numbers. His own lab ran on them. The rotating field, the radio transmission, both Tesla. Months after the man died, the Supreme Court would strike down Marconi's radio patent and restore the priority Tesla had been denied for 40 years. Trump had been building equipment for 3 years on Tesla's foundation. He was reading his own source code in Tesla's handwriting. He found the Westinghouse royalty contract first. The original, signed 1888. The terms were simple. Tesla's alternating current patents, licensed to Westinghouse at $2.50 per horsepower of electrical capacity, sold. Trump did the calculation in his head. Had the contract held, the royalties on alternating current alone would have made Tesla one of the wealthiest men in America before the century turned. By 1943, the number would have been beyond calculation. The contract was torn. The man had held it at both edges and pulled it apart from the center. 2 hands. Deliberate. Trump could see the angle of the tear. Trump wrote one word in his ledger: voluntary. Then he reached for the Morgan file, and in the Morgan file he found the correspondence that ended Wardenclyffe. One question, in the hand of an associate whose name appeared nowhere else in the archive. Not Morgan's hand. Someone who worked close to the money and left no other trace. Trump read it twice. He closed the trunk. He did not copy the question to his ledger. He spent the next 2 hours documenting the ordinary ruin of a man who had given away the century and been charged for the room. He could still hear it. He opened the next trunk. Mark Twain came to the laboratory on South Fifth Avenue on a March evening in 1894. He came because he had heard about the oscillator, and because he was curious, and because he was Mark Twain, and nobody told him no. He arrived at 8 in the evening in the white suit that had become his uniform. In a laboratory full of copper and brass and dark iron, the white suit was the only bright thing in the room. Tesla showed him the oscillator platform, a steel plate mounted on a pedestal, vibrating at a pitch just below hearing. Twain stepped onto it. His suit trembled. His mustache vibrated. The fillings in his teeth sang. He laughed, delighted. Then the vibration found the resonant frequency of his intestine, and he stopped laughing and made for the bathroom. Tesla waited. The bathroom door opened. Twain returned, adjusting his jacket, his dignity compressed but intact. The human body, Tesla said, is a resonance system. Every organ operates at a frequency. When the external frequency matches the internal, the body responds, sometimes productively, sometimes urgently. I noticed, Twain said. He stepped back onto the platform. The assistants left at midnight. Twain sat on a stool and picked up one of Tesla's philosophical notebooks. The private ones. The ones that were not about circuits. He read for 20 minutes. He turned the pages slowly. He set the notebook down and looked at Tesla across the bench. I know exactly what you mean, Twain said. Tesla's hands went still. He was 38 years old. He had been receiving a loan since the pictures started in childhood, and no one had ever said that sentence to him. His mother loved him. Westinghouse believed in him. The men who built his motors called him a genius without understanding what the word meant when applied to a man who received rather than invented. None of them had said, "I know exactly what you mean." The coils hummed in the dark laboratory. Neither man spoke. Two receivers, different instruments, the same source that neither could name. He came back through the spring again and again. Each visit, he read the notebooks. Each visit, he said less. The last visit, he said nothing at all. He sat on the stool and read and closed the notebook and placed his hand flat on the cover and looked at Tesla and nodded once and left. No one else said it until the Hindu monk arrived. Vivekananda, 2 years later. Tesla sat with him for an afternoon, and after that the language changed. Akasha instead of ether, prana instead of energy. The Sanskrit said what English could only circle around. The medium was alive. Twain died in 1910 with Halley's Comet, as he had predicted. Born when the comet came, gone when it returned. Tesla stood at the back of the funeral in a dark suit that was too large for him, because he had been forgetting to eat again. The eulogies were long. The men who delivered them had known Twain as a humorist. None of them mentioned the midnight visits to a laboratory on South Fifth Avenue, where a man in a white suit had read his notebooks and told him, "I know exactly what you mean." The financial trunk was a graveyard of zeros. Hotel receipts, unpaid tabs at the Waldorf, the St. Regis, the Governor Clinton. Forwarding addresses crossed out and rewritten. Always a cheaper room, always a smaller window. But behind the financial ruin, pressed against the back of the trunk, behind the obvious material, Trump found a letter. Serbian. Handwritten. 1937. The translator the custodian's office sent spent 40 minutes with it, then set his pencil down and rubbed his face. "He's writing to a student in Yugoslavia," the translator said. "A young man. Tesla is 81 years old. He is describing the universe as a transmitting system." Transmitting what? Everything. Knowledge, strength, inspiration. He says the signal does not stop because the receiver is imperfect. Trump took the letter back. Whatever the inventory would call it, it was not that. "Last line?" he asked. The translator checked his notes. The signal does not stop because the receiver is imperfect. The signal has never stopped. It was transmitting before we built instruments to hear it, and will be transmitting after the instruments are gone. Trump wrote 4 words in his own ledger. See Philosophical Notebook Review. The translator noticed. "You're keeping 2 inventories." Trump looked at him. The translator was young, a graduate student borrowed from Columbia for 3 days because he spoke Serbian and had clearance. "I'm keeping 1 inventory," Trump said. "Some items appear in more than 1 column." The translator left at 3. Trump sat with the letter and the torn contract and 40 years of a man who had measured the planet's resonant frequency before anyone published it. Upstairs, the room was still sealed. His mother's clipping was in his wallet. He had carried it since the day he found it. He did not take it out. He did not need to. Colorado Springs, June 1899. The laboratory was on Nob Hill, on a patch of high prairie where the nearest neighbor was the sky. He chose it because the air was thin and dry, and because the thunderstorms that came over the Rockies carried a violence the East Coast could not approach, and Tesla needed violence. He needed the planet's own electrical discharge, wild and unmetered. He built the largest coil ever constructed, 51 feet in diameter. When he discharged it, man-made lightning shot 130 feet into the Colorado dark, and the thunder from the coil was heard 15 miles away. He drew so much power that the generator at the El Paso Electric Company caught fire, and every light in Colorado Springs went dark. The operator ran outside and looked east. The sky above the laboratory was lit with artificial lightning, and the rest of the town was black. The electric company restored his power and asked him to please warn them next time. He said he would. He did not. He measured everything, every discharge, every return, every resonance, times to the minute, voltages to the decimal, and the reading appeared in every margin. The resonant frequency between the Earth and the ionosphere, the planet's heartbeat. He measured it in 1899 in a shed on the prairie and circled it in every notebook after. The credit would go to another man half a century later. Tesla had the thing itself. August. The equipment was running at midnight. Then the signal came. From a direction the equipment was not designed to monitor. A repeating pattern. Mathematical. 3 pulses, then silence, then 3 pulses. He ran the calibration twice. The pattern held. What he wrote about it survives. I have observed electrical actions which have appeared inexplicable. Faint and uncertain though they were, they have given me a deep conviction and foreknowledge that ere long all human beings on this globe, as one, will turn their eyes to the firmament above with feelings of love and reverence, thrilled by the glad news. Brethren, we have a message from another world, unknown and remote. It reads 1, 2, 3. The scientific establishment treated the claim as evidence of deterioration. Mars, they said. He thinks he heard Mars. Tesla wrote in the private notation he reserved for observations that lived outside the vocabulary of the century. The feeling is constant now, as if the universe has been attempting to speak for longer than we can measure, and has been waiting for someone to build an instrument precise enough to hear it. I believe I have built one. I believe the instrument is not the coil. He went inside. The equipment ran till dawn. On the morning of the 3rd day, Trump came upstairs for air. The basement air was dead, and a man who spends 2 days inside another man's mind needs 10 minutes inside his own. A man was waiting in the lobby, gray suit, cut too well to have been thought about. He carried nothing. His coffee was half finished, which meant he had arrived early, which meant he had known Trump would come upstairs, which meant someone had been watching the basement door. Dr. Trump. I didn't give my name at the desk. No. The man signaled the waiter without looking at him. Coffee arrived for Trump. Black. The man knew how Trump took his coffee. Trump did not touch it. You've had 2 days with the material, the man said. You understand the scope. I understand a filing system that would take 6 months to catalog properly. I've had 2 days. And in those 2 days, what have you found? Trump looked at the man's hands, nails trimmed short, clean to the cuticle. The hands of a man whose work did not involve objects. Notebooks, patents, correspondence, financial records, theoretical work on electromagnetic resonance and wireless energy transmission, speculative material on what he called teleforce. The death ray. He never called it that, the press called it that. And Is there military application? Trump held his coffee cup without drinking from it. The cup was warm. The lobby was cold. I'll file my report with the custodian's office. The man nodded. He had heard what he needed to hear. He stood. Write what you found, Dr. Trump, not what you felt. He walked through the lobby without looking back. The door opened for him without his touching it because another man positioned at the entrance had been waiting to open it. Trump finished his coffee. He picked up his coat. He went back downstairs. He had one trunk left. Wardenclyffe, 1901. The tower was 187 feet tall, capped with a copper dome. Beneath it, a shaft drove 120 feet into the Long Island earth, anchoring the tower to the planet's conductive core. The design was simple. Only the most radical ideas are. Broadcast energy through the Earth's own resonant frequency. Any receiver anywhere on the surface could draw power from the charged sky. Free, wireless, global. The tower hummed at a frequency too low to hear, but too present to ignore. You felt it in your chest. The tower was singing at the Earth's own frequency, and the Earth was singing back. It was the most beautiful structure Tesla ever built, and the most dangerous, and the danger had nothing to do with the electricity. It was what the tower would prove if it worked. That the Earth's own energy was available to anyone with copper wire, a ground connection, and knowledge of the frequency. The question arrived 3 weeks after the financiers reviewed the plans. A man in a dark coat came to the property, went through the documents and the projections, and asked the question Tesla would hear in his sleep for the rest of his life. Where can I put the meter? The man worked for Morgan. He had no title in any directory. His authority came from proximity to the source of capital, and proximity was all the title he needed. Tesla did not answer because the question had no answer. You cannot meter the ionosphere. You cannot charge for a frequency that belongs to the planet. The gift was free or it was nothing. The man in the dark coat folded the documents into his case, buttoned his coat, and left. The letters from Morgan's office stopped. The funding evaporated. The construction crews left. The tower stood on the Long Island shore for 14 more years while the man who had wired the Century moved from hotel to cheaper hotel, carrying his notebooks and his photograph, unable to pay for lunch. The tower was demolished in 1917. A salvage crew dynamited it for scrap. He learned about it from a newspaper. The foundation and the tunnel system remained in the ground, and they remain today. The sixth trunk was smaller than the others. Leather, no label. The clasp was brass, green at the hinge. Trump opened it at 2 p.m. on the third day. Inside, one notebook, larger than the others. Black leather, the binding cracked along the spine. On the cover, in Tesla's hand, a single word: government. Trump turned the word over. He had seen enough of Tesla's notation by now to understand it did not mean what the custodian's office would assume. It was not a reference to the United States government or any government. It was Tesla's private shorthand for his theory of what governs. What governs the arrival of the pictures? What governs the relationship between the signal and the instrument? What governs reality itself at the frequency beneath the frequency the equipment can measure? He opened it. The entries ran from 1901 to November 1942. 41 years. A record of reception. Tesla's private account of every idea, image, and complete system that had arrived in his mind from the source he could never name. The rotating field in Budapest, the oscillator, the measurements at Colorado, each one recorded as a reception. A signal received by an instrument that happened to be a man. 1915. The tower is gone. They took it for the metal. The source remains. The source never needed a tower. 1919. She came again to the window today. The white pigeon. She has come every morning for 3 years. When she arrives, the pictures return. When she leaves, they fade. I have tested this correlation 47 times. It holds. She is not the source. She is the tuning mechanism. I do not understand the mechanism. I record the observation. 1922. She died today. The white pigeon. 7 years at the window. I held her. Warm, then not. The images stopped. The frequency went quiet. The instrument is silent. And below it, in the same entry, I have loved this bird the way a man loves a woman. I know how this sounds. I know what the men at the Century Club would say. But they have not sat at a window at 4 in the morning, watching a white bird arrive and feeling the frequency return, and knowing that the thing they have spent 60 years trying to name has a wingspan of 14 inches and weighs less than a pound and comes to the window because it chooses to. Not because it was summoned, because it chose. Pages were torn from the notebook after that. Years passed between entries. The hand grew larger and slower. Wake before dawn. Walk to the park or the cathedral. Feed the pigeons. 1931. The pictures return today. Briefly. A fragment I cannot yet place. I recorded it. I do not know if this is a beginning or the echo of an ending. The receiver operates when it operates. It is not mine to command. And then the last entry. November 1942. 2 months before the maid's passkey turned in the lock. The apparatus prevents the gift. Oldest story. The frequency is not stopped. The receiver is silenced. The signal continues through broken men. Then 4 words, centered on the page, written with a hand that did not shake. Hide it. Trust time. Trump closed the notebook. The basement was quiet. The boiler had stopped cycling. He held the black notebook on his lap. This was the thing the man in the gray suit did not know about. The trunk behind the trunks. Someday. His mother's word. He thought, whoever comes next will need to know where to look. He put the notebook inside his coat. October 1897. The Westinghouse Building, Pittsburgh. 46 years before the basement. George Westinghouse sat across the table with his lawyers and his accountants, and the expression of a man who was about to ask another man to save him. The company was drowning in the royalties it owed Tesla. The grid was expanding faster than anyone had predicted. The royalties were compounding into a number that would kill the company before the century turned. If we cannot renegotiate the terms, Westinghouse said, the company will not survive. Tesla looked at the contract on the table. His signature. The terms that would have made him the wealthiest man in America. He looked at Westinghouse, who had believed in alternating current when Edison was electrocuting dogs to frighten the public, who had bet his company on Tesla's motor and had been right, and whose rightness was now killing him. Tesla picked up the contract. He held it with both hands. He tore it. He tore it into 4 pieces and set them on the table and pushed them toward Westinghouse's lawyers, who stared at the pieces without counting them. "Take it," Tesla said. "The gift matters more." Westinghouse held the handshake longer than necessary. He knew he would never repay what he had just been given. On the way out, Tesla stopped. 1/4 of the torn contract lay on the floor where it had fallen. He picked it up. He put it in his pocket. He never said why. January 11, 1943, the 3rd day, the last day. Trump sat at the desk in the basement with the government pen and the report form the custodian's office had provided. 3 pages, carbon copies. A bureaucratic document designed to reduce 80 trunks to a paragraph. He wrote quickly. His handwriting was clear. I can report that my perusal of his papers did not disclose any notes or information referring to new methods or principles that would constitute a hazard in unfriendly hands. Tesla's efforts during the past 15 years were primarily of a speculative, philosophical, and somewhat promotional character, but did not include new sound, workable principles or methods for realizing such results. Every word was technically accurate, speculative. The notebook described the universe as a transmitting system, philosophical. The War Department would call it that. Promotional. He had spent decades trying to convince anyone who would listen that free energy was possible. Did not include new sound, workable principles. The principles were ancient. The man had spent 60 years documenting a signal older than the equipment he built to detect it. There was nothing new in reception. The signal had been transmitting since before the instruments existed. Trump signed the report. 800 words, 3 pages. The professional assessment of a physicist from MIT who had reviewed 80 trunks in 3 days and found nothing of military value. The report was a door. It opened onto a room that contained nothing of interest. And behind the door, in a room nobody would enter because the report said there was no reason to enter it, stood 80 trunks holding the most complete record of genius the century would produce. He thought about where the notebook would go. Not to the War Department, not to the men in gray suits. Somewhere it could wait. He did not know who would open it or when. He knew only that it would go forward, and that whoever received it would already be listening. He stood. He put on his coat. The notebook was already inside it, against his chest, where it had been since the previous afternoon. He put the report in his briefcase and walked up the stairs from the basement for the last time. The lobby was cold. January wind off 8th Avenue through the revolving door. A woman in a fur coat checking in. A bellhop with luggage. The ordinary machinery of an ordinary hotel in the middle of a war, every light in it running on the current he gave away. Metered now. Billed. Owned by companies built on a gift the man had refused to sell. He passed the table where the man in the gray suit had sat. The table was empty. The coffee cups had been cleared. He pushed through the revolving door into the January dusk. Manhattan. The lights coming on in every window of every building in every direction. The grid running north to Harlem and south to the Battery and across the rivers to Long Island, where foundations lay in the dirt at Wardenclyffe, with tunnels beneath it that nobody had finished surveying. He rode the subway home to Queens with the 5 o'clock shift. Men in wool coats reading the evening papers, a soldier asleep with his cap over his eyes. Nobody looked at him. A man in a brown coat on the E train to Jamaica with a black notebook pressed against his ribs. His wife would ask how it went. He would say it was routine. She would hand him a drink and go to bed, and he would sit in the dark and feel the weight of the notebook in his coat on the hook by the door, and think about the man in room 3327 who had spent 60 years carrying something heavier. The report said nothing. The coat held everything. He did not look back. What happened after is a matter of record. The 80 trunks were cataloged and shipped. 60 arrived in Belgrade. 20 were never accounted for and are not listed in any inventory a citizen can read. Decades later, the Bureau opened part of its Tesla file to the public. Researchers set it beside the 1943 inventory and found pages that had been cataloged in that basement and were no longer anywhere. On the Long Island shore, the tower is gone, but the shaft beneath it is not. Surveys of what Tesla built underground are still going and still unfinished. In the summer of 1945, a device was detonated in a New Mexico desert, and the man who built it said he had become Death, the destroyer of worlds. He was quoting a poem 3,000 years old. Tesla was already gone. They kept building. They detonated weapons high inside the ionospheric field Tesla had spent his life measuring, the field he believed he was guarding. His papers had been assessed as nothing of value. Something came down in a desert. The men who built the wall of secrecy around it are building it still. Whatever they recovered told them what Tesla's signal had told him at Colorado. We are not at the top of the chain. One of them went out a high window at a naval hospital, and his file closed for good. The weapon Tesla drew to make war impossible is being built now to win the next one. Directed energy, megawatt class, he called it Teleforce. In the hearings where men describe being cut down by an invisible beam on 3 continents, no one says his name. And the company that once drowned in the royalties it owed him, the same company he saved by tearing up the contract, has been handed the grid again, given the country's power to build. The name over the door has not changed since. The physicist who carried the black notebook out of that basement went back to his laboratory. 3 years later, he founded a company that would become the world's leading maker of particle accelerators, machines that drive enormous voltage through matter. He had been sent to bury Tesla. He spent the rest of his life building on him. He had a nephew. The nephew sits in the White House. Of his uncle, he has said more than once, "He used to tell me about nuclear before nuclear was nuclear." And a man who runs a company that carries Tesla's name says in public that reality is code, and the code can be rewritten. He has been saying versions of it for years. The 2 most powerful men alive today, and the 2 men in that hotel in the winter of 1943. The record does not say these are the same people. For the last 8 years of his life, a novelist in California described the same transmitting core in almost the same words, and never read a page of these notebooks. The signal does not require permission. It requires a receiver. Some things never show up on a balance sheet. The apparatus cannot inventory them. It can only remove what it cannot convert. Sometimes it reaches for the notebook and finds it already gone. The photograph of the white bird on the bedside table. Item 7 in the official inventory, assessed as non-scientific, returned to estate. My brain is only a receiver. In the universe, there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. I have not penetrated into the secrets of this core, but I know that it exists. Hide it. Trust time.